Well, the four plaintiffs that were suing Kyle Rittenhouse and a bunch of other people like the Kenosha Guard and the Boogaloo Bois and Kevin Mathewson and Ryan Balch have dropped their lawsuit with prejudice. According to the news reports, they didn't get along too well, these two attorneys, and one of them accused the other one of not paying her, and it got pretty ugly, I guess, and so they withdrew. And because it was withdrawn with prejudice, they're not going to be able to bring it up again. Now, if you read the document, and we are going to, you would kind of see that they were in a bit of trouble already anyway. The complaint and request for a jury trial document that we're going to see is crazy. I have not seen anything quite like it. The juvenile language and leaps in logic are a sight to behold. So we're going to take a look at this. And if you're an English instructor, all I pray is that you look away. Just look away. And if you're the English teacher of these attorneys, shame, shame. Hello out there. I am trying to get through.
With his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnny Walker Dredd to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnny Walker Dredd Show.
Okay, so let's take a look at this. Who are the plaintiffs? Well, Hannah Giddings, Christopher McNeil, Nathan Pete, and Carmen Palmer. Hannah Giddings was the life partner of one of those that was killed by Kyle Rittenhouse. Christopher McNeil and Nathan Pete were local protesters, and Carmen Palmer was a protester that came in from Milwaukee. The plaintiffs: Kevin Mathewson, who was the commander of the Kenosha Guard, the Kenosha Guard itself, Ryan Balch, we have talked about here quite a bit, the Boogaloo Bois, Kyle Rittenhouse, and Facebook. And here are the attorneys that have filed this heap of garbage. Jason Flores-Williams and Jennifer D. Sirrine. I think it's pronounced Sirrine. At any rate, she's complaining that the other person stiffed her for some money. It got ugly, and so they have withdrawn this lawsuit. So let's take a look at what we got here. It begins. It begins rather interesting. In our society, heavily armed groups of untrained men are free to possess ludicrous opinions about Hitler having admirable qualities, black people being intellectually inferior to whites, or our government being controlled by Satan-worshipping pedophiles. However, when these beliefs turn into a conspiracy to deprive the rest of us of our constitutional guarantees through threats, fear, assault, violence, and murder, then the actions and coordination of these right-wing militias become the subject matter of law. Okay, so we're already starting off. Well, first of all, it begins in our society, heavily armed groups of untrained men. Trained in what? And they have these opinions about Hitler having admirable qualities and Satan worshiping pedophiles. Okay, I know what they're talking about, but how is that going to connect to anything with the shootings in Kenosha? Well, it's going to be interesting to see if they can make that connection here. Keep in mind, this is their opening salvo, and so they got together and decided that this was the best way to start, was by bringing up Hitler and Satan. Continuing, we have an army. Well, technically, we have a military. The U.S. Army is one of those branches, although I guess the Space Force is now the fourth. We do not need people playing Army. You going to cite that? Who's saying that? Is that your opinion? Who decides that? particularly when their targets are engaged in the expression of fundamental rights. Okay, so you can see that this thing has already started off rather murky, but let's continue on. The civil rights provisions codified in 42 U.S.C. In 1985 and 86 protect us from such harm. Now, if you're not familiar with 42 U.S.C., sovereign citizens love 42 U.S.C. They get pulled over all the time for not having a license plate or not having a driver's license, and they always invoke 42 U.S.C. And 42 U.S.C. basically states that it's against the law to deprive somebody of rights that are constitutionally guaranteed. And it not only can be a criminal offense, but it also could be a tort. So let me move forward a little bit here. These Reconstruction-era provisions were designed precisely for the scheme that was violently executed in Kenosha, Wisconsin, a repetition of horrific violence we now experience across the entire country, where white racist militias use Facebook to broadcast and publicize a call to arms for untrained private citizens to travel across state lines to the peaceful protests advocating for racial justice in America with assault rifles, tactical gear, and militia-grade equipment. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Notice the language. Horrific violence we now experience across the entire country. Again, this is written like it was in a high school essay contest. A losing entry. Where white racist militias use Facebook to broadcast and publicize a call to arms. So they put it in quotation marks, which I guess means it's not really a call to arms, but then later they're going to say that it was. For untrained private citizens, what is the deal with being trained? Ryan Balch, one of the defendants here, is former Army. He's trained. Why is he being named as a defendant in this lawsuit? And to travel across state lines. Oh my God. This is one of the dumb arguments I made. I'm really surprised that the lawyers are making the same one. There is nothing about traveling across state lines that means anything. It's constitutionally guaranteed that you reserve the same rights in your state as you do when you go to another state. There is nothing to be said about traveling across state lines. The very fact that they mention this means that they really don't understand what they're trying to achieve here. Who cares if any of these people traveled across state lines? It doesn't mean anything. Oh, and by the way, they traveled across state lines to peaceful protests. Yeah, we know all about those peaceful protests. Advocating for racial justice in America with assault rifles, tactical gear, and militia-grade equipment. What is militia-grade equipment? I have no idea. By the way, it looks like they're advocating for racial justice using assault rifles, tactical gear, and militia-grade equipment. This is what happens when you have a sentence that's too long. All right, let's move forward. And we have a Facebook screen capture. All the stuff that's in it is somewhere else in this document. So I'm going to go ahead and move over it. These calls to arms, as one might infer, are not met with the responsible consideration of concerned citizens, oh no, but by violent, racist rhetoric in which militia members promise to shoot protesters. Their desire to literally kill, as opposed to figuratively kill, people displayed publicly for all to see. So we have a split infinitive. The comma between protesters and there looks like a comma splice, and they put literally kill. Okay. Here's a little lesson for you two attorneys. This is a legal document. If you write to kill people, it's probably going to be understood that means literally. These threats are, as one might infer again, not issued by thoughtful and respectful Americans dedicated to the preservation of the Republic. Rather, they are people driven by the most outrageous of conspiracy theories, racist hatred of their fellow citizens that one hoped went out with the Ku Klux Klan, and disgust towards anyone who thought that equal protection of the laws was something that ought to be maintained. Okay, so a reason why I highlighted that one hoped went out with the Ku Klux Klan, well, first of all, I think the Ku Klux Klan is still around. The other one is, What use is that prepositional phrase? What does including that do for anything? Let's take it out and read it. Rather, they are people driven by the most outrageous of conspiracy theories, racist hatred of their fellow citizens, and disgust towards anyone who thought that equal protection of the laws was something that ought to be maintained. Doesn't that read better? And I'm going to skip over some of this. I should read this. This is an email that was sent to Police Chief Miskinnis, who is the chief of Kenosha's police department, from the Kenosha Guard commander, Kevin Mathewson. As you know, I'm the commander of the Kenosha Guard, a local militia. We are mobilizing tonight and have about 3,000 RSVPs. Okay, in my mind, I'm thinking maybe about 200 people show up. We have volunteers that will be in uptown, downtown, and at the entrances to their neighborhoods. Our effort has made national media, and he shows this URL. So this is, according to this complaint, this means he's proudly sharing it with the police chief. Okay. I ask that you do not have your officers tell us to go home under threat of arrest as you have done in the past. We are willing to talk to KPD and open a discussion. It is evident that no matter how many officers, deputies, and other law enforcement officers that are here, you will still be outnumbered. Thank you, Kenosha Guard Commander. Could that be interpreted as a veiled threat? Yeah, I suppose so. The planning and preparation exhibited in this post led to plaintiffs and other protesters being terrorized, assaulted, harassed, and placed in so much fear when facing the business end of a military-grade assault rifle that they determined it was too dangerous to continue to protest. When facing the business end of military-grade assault rifles. This is a legal document. And they write this drivel. It's a cliche. This was the case with plaintiff Carmen Palmer, a black woman who was forced to flee Kenosha back to Milwaukee with her children and her racial justice group, but not before having to fix the tires on their cars that were slashed. Okay, slashing tires, no good. That's irresponsible. Can't be doing that kind of crap. The Boogaloo Bois, another extremist group, also joined the Kenosha Guard to further the violence. As is now sadly well known, get this, defendant Kyle Rittenhouse answered the call to arms by driving across state lines from Antioch, Illinois, with an assault rifle in violation of state law. What? First of all, he didn't drive across state lines with his rifle. They say, as is now sadly well known. It's not well known. In fact, it's false, and it did not happen. Now, here's what's interesting here. It says here, Kyle answered the call by driving across state lines. But in footnote 4, it says he was driven by his mother. So which is it? Another thing is they say, with an assault rifle in violation of state law. What law? Driving across a state line with an assault rifle is against state law? What law are you talking about? They don't cite it. They don't even say. This is a legal document. Upon arrival, he liaised with defendant Ryan Balch, a vowed member of the Boogaloo Bois, whose social media, like other members of his militia, contains Nazi propaganda such as "Truth will triumph, Adolf Hitler," and "Beyond Europe and the whole world, the international Jewry will be recognized as its entire demonic threat." Okay, first of all, he says, upon arrival, he liaised with defendant Ryan Balch. The connotation of that is they had set up this meeting and they met up as a result of this planning. That did not happen. Ryan Balch, in 2 interviews, stated that he stumbled upon Kyle completely accidentally. He did not know Kyle before this event. And furthermore, Kyle is out there defending a car lot very far away from any of the protests. So if they liaised for the purposes of causing mayhem, why would they meet there? There isn't a shred of evidence that Ryan and Kyle knew each other before this event, or that they met on account of any preparation. Mark Zuckerberg already went through Kyle's Facebook postings in detail, found nothing. Kyle is not a member of a militia. There's no evidence to support that. Also, they say Ryan Balch is an avowed member of the Boogaloo Bois, but there is no support for that here. And frankly, that's somewhat in contention. This assertion about Nazi propaganda and the international Jewry, I looked at that some time ago. The Southern Poverty Law Center had this listed. The connections there are pretty thin. I don't take what the SPLC says for gospel. It says, oh, by the way, Defendant Balch has his own page on Southern Poverty Law Center's Hate Watch. Well, no, Hate Watch has a page devoted to him, but he doesn't have his own page. Again, English, man, it's a good idea. In furtherance of the conspiracy, Defendant Balch assumed the role of tactical advisor in capital letters, as if it's an official rank, of the squad that included Rittenhouse, and along with other armed militia members, implying that Rittenhouse is a member of an armed militia. He's not. Took up pre-planned sniper positions on roofs and strategic street corners. This effectively controlled the ingress and egress of Black Lives Matter protesters around the Civic Center Park. Do they know what a sniper is? A sniper is a person who waits for an opportunity target through concealment. And so the sniper doesn't want anybody to see him. He's either covered up or he's very far away. But whatever the case, snipers like to get the first shot off because you don't know they're there. The people on the roofs were way out in the open. Furthermore, it says they effectively control the ingress and egress. So how would they have done that if they were in sniper positions where nobody could see them? The reason why they use sniper is because it's emotionally loaded language. This makes it look as if the militia members were taking positions to get good shots at BLM protesters. How many of them shot BLM protesters? There was only one person there that night that shot protesters, and frankly, I don't even think they were protesters. But these people attacked him first. None of these other hundreds of militia members shot anybody. Oh, this is where it gets really good. This is when tragedy struck. Under the command of tactical advisor Balch, the group of co-conspirators trailed and harassed plaintiffs and protesters, scaring them, arguing, intimidating, and ultimately engaging with them in a parking lot. What terrible sentence construction there. It's not even parallel. Defendant Rittenhouse, under the tactical supervision of Defendant Balch, then shot and killed 2 protesters with his rifle, as well as shot and grievously injured a third. So he shot these protesters under the tactical supervision of Defendant Balch. Ryan Balch didn't even know that Kyle had shot anybody. It's very clear. At the end, we have video of Ryan talking over the issues with other BLM protesters, trying to identify who it was that did it. Kyle was by himself when he was attacked. In fact, he got separated from Defendant Balch and another former military person that was there with them. And that's why he was attacked. He was out by himself. It had nothing to do with any tactical supervision of Defendant Balch. This makes it look like Balch planned all this. I mean, this is almost grounds for a defamation suit. By the way, they also mentioned this assault rifle. I'm tired of that. It's a sporting rifle. It's an AR-15, semi-automatic rifle. Assault rifle. Give me a break. It's not an assault rifle. One of the protesters who was murdered, oh, by the way, we have already decided that the case against Kyle Rittenhouse has already been settled, and he has been convicted of murder, so we can now say that Anthony Huber was murdered, I guess. Again, these are lawyers. I thought that lawyers were better than this. So we've already called him a murderer. Again, if Kyle wins, and he's going to, I wonder if we have an anti-defamation suit here. Probably not. was the life partner of plaintiff Hannah Giddings, who, along with experiencing the nightmare of the militias, while peacefully protesting, was forced to watch her best friend and soulmate die. Well, actually, she wasn't forced to watch it, but okay, I sympathize with her. She had a rough night that night. Now, let's see here. We have also footnote 6. Let's read this. Mrs. Giddings, or Ms. Giddings, was the plaintiff who was called dyke by the militia members. Well, where was that? I don't remember reading anything about that. Receiving other insults. Whatever, I don't care about insults, but it makes it sound as if they had mentioned this previously, but they didn't. Okay, if I'm the English teacher, I kind of put a little question mark like, where was this discussed? Okay, let's go back up. Perhaps the worst part of this organized deprivation of rights and dignity is that it all could have been prevented. Well, I think the worst part would have been the actual shootings. Myself, what was that one joke about Bill Cosby by Norm Macdonald? Someone told Norm that the worst part about Bill Cosby rape allegations is the hypocrisy. And Norm said, no, I think it's the raping. Okay, so I'm not Norm, all right? I try my best. I don't have his comic skills. Okay, so it goes on to talk about Facebook and its involvement. Frankly, Facebook, I don't care about them. It was only days after plaintiffs and protesters were forced to flee in terror and watch their friends and loved ones die. Again, this right out of high school, that Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg issued a public apology for what he called an operational mistake. Okay, if we are to adopt the CEO's highly sanitized phrase, this mistake empowered right-wing militias to inflict extreme violence and deprive plaintiffs and protesters of their rights. All right. More importantly, this is where it gets good. Facebook continues to provide militias with the tools to further their violent conspiracies at a time when we are entering into an election period in which the President of the United States, who openly supports the activities of these militias while insulting Black Lives Matter and other racial justice protesters, has declared his intent to contest the forthcoming election. Yeah, this lawsuit isn't politically driven. No. Politics aren't entering into this. No. This refusal to peacefully leave the White House could easily result in the tools and platform that Facebook continues to provide these armed groups being sued to broadcast, promote, and prepare another call to arms, but this time in our nation's capital. That has nothing to do with Kyle Rittenhouse and these defendants. What this means is they know the political leanings of these judges, so they're going to stick in something here about Trump. So unless you're a sovereign citizen, you probably don't care about the jurisdiction arguments here. I'll skip over that. And there's probably not much here. I go ahead and... Here are the parties. Plaintiff Hannah Giddings was the life partner of Anthony Huber, the young man of conscience who was shot and killed by defendant Rittenhouse while trying to disarm him. Along with watching her partner die, she suffered threats, insults. I don't care about insults. Harassment and intimidation from the Kenosha Guard and Boogaloo Bois, including having assault rifles pointed directly at her while the militias kennelled protesters. I don't think I've ever seen the word kennelled used in that fashion. Well, okay, I guess you learn something new every day, but I always thought kennelled referred to dogs. The other one is that she had assault rifles pointed directly at her. Do we have that on film? Do we have videotape? I haven't seen it. I mean, keep in mind something. If this happened, it's on video. Has to be. It would have been live streamed. Ms. Giddings is a single mother who works 2 jobs. Oh, who cares? And has experienced mental and financial injury with the militia killing of her partner. She remains stalwart in Anthony's name. her conscience driven by the desire to make a better world for her daughter. This sounds like you're introducing her at a reception. Plaintiff Christopher McNeil is a black man who has lived in Kenosha for almost 22 years, having attended Bradford High School, where he played cornerback for the Red Devils. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm wrong. I thought I had this all figured out, but he played cornerback for the Red Devils. That changes everything. Mr. McNeil was confronted, commanded, assaulted, and harassed, with his movement inhibited by militia members. A black man being intimidated and told what he could and could not do, say and could not say by armed white men. That's some really strange sentence construction there. Unusual use of the colon. Oh, let's take a look here. We got 7, and down here, what does that say? A description of the history of slavery and Jim Crow laws in our country. Exactly what the plaintiffs and protesters were raising their voices against. That's not even a complete sentence. Mr. McNeil sought the help of the Kenosha police, but was unable to distinguish between the police and the militias, as they appeared to him to be collaborating in their effort to deny the equal protection of the laws and the rights and privileges enumerated in our Constitution. So are you suing them? And what's this? As they appeared to him to be collaborating. That's conjecture. Mr. McNeil is a tattoo artist. Oh, well, hell. That makes that's everything here. Really important to mention that. Whose conscience and engagement comes from wanting to see black Americans treated with dignity and respect. So again, they're reading this off like as if they're being introduced at a luncheon. Plaintiff Carmen Palmer, a 40-year-old black woman, has lived in Milwaukee her entire life. She has personally witnessed and experienced discrimination and violence against black Americans. Okay? So that when she saw the shooting of Jacob Blake, she decided enough was enough, and it was time to raise her voice for justice. Oh, by the way, Jacob Blake, he was the guy who had a knife, got into a fight with the police, refused to obey commands, tried to get in a car with a bunch of kids, and they shot him. After traveling to Kenosha with their children, people are always saying, Kyle Rittenhouse should not have been there. He's a minor. Well, she had her kids with her. And Social Justice Church Group, she suffered extensive harm at the hands of the militias, including being threatened with rifles, pepper sprayed, and having her and her entire group's tires slashed. Well, I don't know if her entire group's tires are a part of this. They're not involved in the lawsuit, so why are their damages important? Okay, I'm not a lawyer, so maybe somebody can tell me. Trapping them all in Kenosha. It was the scariest experience of my life, says Ms. Palmer, and I have seen a lot. I had to keep it together for my children, but when I got home, I had a panic attack. Well, it's good that she waited till she got home to have one rather than while she was driving. Plaintiff Nathan Pete, now 28, has lived in Kenosha since he was 14. He went to both Bradford and Tremper high schools. I don't care. He grew up impoverished and experienced firsthand how poor people and people of color are treated differently in this society. But instead of turning his back on the issues, he became an engaged, committed, peaceful activist and independent journalist who live streamed from the event. What does that have to do with his damages? Again, maybe a lawyer can tell me how this is relevant. After working a 12-hour day, he began to see and hear about the violent threats that were being made on the Kenosha Guard Facebook page about Black Lives Matter protesters. Well, how did he hear about them? Is he a member of the militia? That's their claim about Kyle, you'll see it, that he could not have known about these protests unless he was a member of a militia. Well, he found out about them. Though exhausted, irrelevant, he went to the protest to both voice his support for Black Lives Matter and to document the actions of the militias. Once he arrived, Mr. Pete was forcibly corralled into the repair shop parking lot. How? where he witnessed the murder of defendant Rittenhouse's first victim. So again, Kyle's been convicted already in their minds. Though he attempted to rescue the man and take him to the nearby hospital, he was unable to do so due to the lack of space and chaos that had been generated by the militia's corralling tactics. What the hell does that mean? Lack of space? Are they saying that there wasn't room to drive his car? What does that mean? What chaos? You have a person who is hurt. There's a hospital across the street. How is chaos going to prevent you from getting this person over across the street? Oh, by the way, Joseph Rosenbaum did end up in the hospital. They took him to the hospital. So how did the space and chaos prevent him from doing so? I don't know. And one more thing, they talked about corralling tactics, but they don't mention actually what they did. Did they point rifles at them and threaten to shoot them if they moved? Did they handcuff them? Did they attack or violently assault them? What? You just say corralling tactic. All right. Now they talk about defendant Mathewson, who was the commander of the Kenosha Guard. I think everything that was written here has been already stated, so I'm going to skip over it. And again, there's a whole bunch of Facebook stuff, but it's been stated elsewhere in the document. Where citizens were engaged in the expression of their fundamental rights and privileges. This sort of language that shows up all the time, that people were terrorized, people had their rights derived. It shows up so repetitively that you just get tired of saying it after a while. We get it. We get it. Okay, the rise of Black Lives Matter, a racial justice group embraced by civic organizations and respected corporations around the country, like That Matters, seems to have triggered men like Commander Mathewson. Notice the language, just real sloppy. Into forming heavily armed paramilitary groups with overwhelmingly white male membership, who hold conspirational and racist beliefs. They then attempt to take over the streets under the facade of protecting property, thereby violating the rights of citizens who tend to be people of color. People concerned about social justice, or in short, the people whom these right-wing militias believe to be less American. Again, the sentence structure is really strange, but they italicize less American, but they don't cite that. If you're going to italicize it, tell us where you got it. Defendant Kenosha Guard is an unincorporated association, which to me means that it's just some dudes that call themselves members. I don't know if they are even an organization. I don't know how you sue such a thing, but okay. I'm not a lawyer. I'm sure there must be some way to extract money from the Kenosha Guard, even though it doesn't look like they're really even an organization. But all right, I'm not going to pound that point. I'm going to skip down. In furtherance of this scheme, the Kenosha Guard engaged in military tactics against plaintiffs and protesters, including threats, harassment, assault, the creation of a public nuisance, false assumption of law enforcement authority, and of course, violence and death. So they're claiming the Kenosha Guard engaged in military tactics of death. But Kyle was not a member of the Kenosha Guard. There isn't a shred of evidence to show that Kyle was ever a member of the Kenosha Guard. But they're clearly stating here that the Kenosha Guard was involved in the deaths of these two protesters. Defendant Ryan Balch is a Wisconsin resident, Nazi sympathizer, and avowed member of the Boogaloo Bois. Now, I think, again, that the Southern Poverty Law Center's connection between Ryan and these things is a little bit thin. It could very well be true, but what I found on there wasn't particularly convincing. But then again, I'm a little bit biased possibly, and so maybe I didn't read it like I should have. Defendant Balch assumed a lead role in tactical advisement on the night of August 25th, taking command of the squad that included Defendant Rittenhouse. It was under tactical advisor Balch's command that the Kenosha Guard and Boogaloo Bois intimidated, harassed, threatened, and violated the rights and privileges of plaintiffs and protesters. So he's only the tactical advisor of about 6 or 7 people there. And they're claiming that made him the tactical advisor of the Kenosha Guard and the Boogaloo Bois. And there's hundreds there. I don't see how they're making that claim here. Based on his own representations, Tactical Advisor Balch, so he's got a title now, he's Tactical Advisor Balch, was uniquely qualified to assume command. By the way, uniquely qualified means that there is nobody else. Uniquely means only one. Qualified to assume command and direction of the group that contained Defendant Rittenhouse. I have a feeling other people could have done it, so I don't think he's uniquely qualified. The Southern Poverty Law Center has also noted that Defendant Balch is a Nazi sympathizer. Again, I think that is a bit tenuous, who through his social media has expressed admiration for Adolf Hitler and the Great Replacement theory. None of his actions that night support this. All night long, he's actually being very friendly to BLM protesters. And at the end, he's talking with them about what happened, and he's telling them that he was there to protect them as well as everyone else from any kind of violence. If you watched Ryan Balch that night throughout, he seems to be doing nothing but good things that night. There is, at no point does he try to intimidate anybody. At no point does he tell anybody else to do so. In fact, when one of his own militiamen got a little bit cross with some protesters, he stopped him and told him to cool it. So the video of Ryan Balch that I have seen, and I've seen a lot of the video of him that night. In fact, pretty much every video slice that there is about him shows that he was behaving very nicely that night. He was not out to hurt anyone. And if anything, he was there to protect BLM's right to protest. And then they have Defendant Boogaloo Bois as an unincorporated association pursuant to Wisconsin, whatever, and a right-wing militia that has a goal of fomenting race war in America. The organization is also known as the Mujahideen, as 2 members have been recently charged with providing material support to Hamas. So 2 people charged with providing material support, and that gets them known as the Mujahideen. Okay. And a 3rd member who allegedly involved in the recent cold-blooded shooting of sheriff's officers in Los Angeles, California. Wait, the Boogaloo Bois are all about attacking black people, right? And they're supposed to be on the side of the evil law enforcement. But their member shot sheriff's officers. Okay. I don't know about any of this stuff. This all kind of sounds a little bit tenuous. The Boogaloo Bois that were in Wisconsin, what is their connection to any of this? I need to know that. Okay, so they mentioned a little bit more about Tactical Advisor Balch, but I don't know if there's anything here that's of too much interest. It makes a big deal out of the Boogaloo Bois having a certain insignia on their clothing, like I guess that matters somehow in this lawsuit. I love this. Number 31. Defendant Ryan Balch is an Illinois resident who traveled to Kenosha, Wisconsin on August 25th to join the militia movement. After joining a group of similarly armed men, he then proceeded to shoot 3 people. Wait, I think they're talking about Kyle Rittenhouse, not Ryan Balch. This was prepared and submitted. To a judge. And this is not some minor deal. They've outlined here Defendant Ryan Balch and told what he did, and they got him confused with somebody else. Now, let's suppose that they had put in Kyle Rittenhouse. There is no evidence that he traveled to Kenosha to join a militia movement. None. They don't state any evidence here. Now, I understand that they don't necessarily have to disclose all of the evidence they have in front of them, but, I mean, give us something more than this. And then I'm going to completely skip over Facebook. Don't care about them. They can lose their ass as far as I'm concerned. The police shootings of unarmed black people continue to plague the United States. To draw attention to the assault of Jacob Blake, what does he have to do with unarmed black people? He had a knife. Everybody knows now, hopefully. Oh, they don't. They're too stupid. They still think he was unarmed. Most people know that Jacob Blake was armed that night. He had a knife. He admitted he had the knife. He even dropped the knife and then told Michael Strahan that he picked it up. So everybody knows that he was armed, except CNN, MSNBC, ABC, and CBS. They don't know it yet. Who was paralyzed after being shot 4 times in the back? No, that's not true. 7. These are, by the way, this section's called facts, and yet they can't get their facts straight. The Black Lives Matter movement organized a protest in Kenosha, Wisconsin. In response, armed militia groups conspired with race-based animus to violate their rights, harass, intimidate, shoot, and in the case of 2 protesters, kill them. So the shooting of the 2 protesters was a conspiracy? They planned this? We know what happened. We saw it on video. Kyle Rittenhouse is separated from Ryan Balch and that other military dude. And he's walking down the street and he gets into a confrontation with JoJo Rosenbaum. How was that planned? And then after he shot Rosenbaum, a mob chased after him. That was planned? That was part of a conspiracy? Okay, don't care about Facebook. Oh, I do like the ending though. And it is time for the company to face actual consequences for its inaction. I think that's up to the judge to decide, not you. All right, then they have the history of the militias. Let me just go ahead. Oh, this is really good. I like this. They're talking about the Boogaloo Bois. Members are often seen wearing Hawaiian shirts and military fatigues to identify themselves at protests in case the assault rifles they carry fail to get the message across. So in other words, this assault rifle I have is not enough to get our message across. I'm going to do it by wearing a Hawaiian shirt. This is what happens when you try to use this flowery language loaded with emotion. In case the assault rifles they carry fail to get the message across. It's so cliched. They communicate and identify through memes, oh heavens, insignias, and symbols as well, such as the igloo flag with Hawaiian print. And then, of course, we have a little bit of a footnote down here. The use of altered versions of Pepe, the cartoon frog, that is a favorite meme of the alt-right, is particularly common. So what? Who cares? Make a point. Does this mean anything? And by the way, there's Pepe and his Boogaloo bazooka. So, there is a terrible history of violence associated with members of this group. Now, there's the Boogaloo Bois. Remember, they were all about racial hatred. They hate black people, they hate Jews, and they want to kill them. On May 29, 2020, Stephen Carrillo was arrested and charged with the murder and attempted murder of law enforcement officers. The federal complaint linked Carrillo with the Boogaloo movement, stating he was a member of a group called Bougie Bastards, the Armory. Okay, it might be helpful that you then tell us how the Bougie Bastards is connected to the Boogaloo movement. The Armory group was not removed by Facebook until June 17th following coverage of Carrillo's alleged murder spree. Oh, wait a minute. Now we use the word alleged. With Kyle, he's murderer. But here we use alleged. Okay. So I'm going to skip over this. The peaceful protests by Black Lives Matter and its supporters began on August 23, 2020. A state of emergency was declared and the National Guard arrived the next day. You know why? Because it wasn't all that peaceful. You don't call the National Guard in unless something bad has happened. It wasn't peaceful. So they mentioned here something about a racist dog whistle. I don't really particularly like that term. If you're going to file a brief to the court, I would expect that you would use more precise language. Okay, so now they're talking about some of the racist rhetoric and violent rhetoric that went on. Following this publication, and this is talking about the InfoWars deal, now deleted Reddit threads in the subreddit Kenosha, whatever, further encouraged violence. One poster claimed they were traveling from Green Bay with lots of guns, lots of pipe bombs, going to cleanse the streets of rioters. Okay, so how many pipe bombs went off that day? How many people were shot other than the 2 people that actually attacked Kyle Rittenhouse? All these militia members and this massive conspiracy that Facebook promoted, heavily armed, out to kill as many people as possible, going to cleanse the streets of rioters. And how many people were actually shot? 2. And, well, 3. And those people attacked supposed militia member who was not even a militia member. So some of the Reddit posts were pretty nasty, I must say. I would not have been happy seeing some of this stuff posted. But keep in mind, despite all of this violent rhetoric, not much happened that night. I didn't see anything much on any of the live streams that showed that people were getting shot or even had guns pointed at them. And I watched 2 hours of footage. I didn't see it. And we'll move on here. Okay, now we're talking about Ryan Balch, and it says, he inserted himself into the group, claiming to be tactical advisor, after which they proceeded to point their assault rifles at protesters, threatening, scaring, insulting, and harassing them with words such as dyke, and I'm not going to say this, might get tagged by YouTube, as well as kenneling and corralling them into certain areas, telling them where they could and could not go. I did not see any of this on video. So if anybody knows of videos that shows them doing this, don't give me this crap that nobody happened to be having video on. Give me a break. If they were doing this all night, somebody would have turned on their video camera. They can't go to Taco Bell without videotaping their enchilada, but they won't video record this. Defendant Balch and other co-conspirators took up positions on roofs in order to act as snipers. Again, they did not act as snipers, and I don't think Balch was on a roof. I never saw him on a roof the entire night. I don't believe he was. In addition to positioning themselves on strategic street corners so that protesters could see and feel the assault rifles being trained on them. Okay, there would have to be hours of footage of this if this actually did happen. I'd like to see it. So they go on to talk about how they also acted like police officers. That's for another video. So when Plaintiff Pete arrived at the Civic Center at approximately 8:30 to record the events of the protest, so he's recording everything. And he was live streaming, by the way, so that should be on YouTube somewhere. There were roughly 50 militia members in the park and surrounding areas. They were all carrying assault rifles, pistols as sidearms, wearing bulletproof vests, and sporting other wartime tactical gear and communication devices. By the way, wartime is one word. What tactical gear are they talking about? Okay, I don't know. The men were combative, aggressively trailing protesters in a belligerent and threatening manner, which would be on videotape all over the place. And again, kindling protesters into certain areas that were chaotic and unsafe. Well, what was chaotic and unsafe about them? What was unsafe? And again, I don't understand this kindling thing. I've never seen that word used this way, but okay, maybe it is. Both the men on the ground and the snipers on the roofs were all communicating with each other verbally and electronically. So there's old Jimmy Bob up on the roof, and I turn around and say, "Hey, Jimmy, how's everything going on up there?" And Jimmy yells down, "Doing okay, doing okay." That's communicating with each other verbally and electronically. Electronically means they're texting each other. See how they do this? Okay, so it goes on here, talks about Mr. Pete and what he witnessed, and it says he could not differentiate between the militias and police, who appeared to be working in coordination. What's conjecture? You want to sue the police? Do it. Mr. Pete was then forcibly corralled into the repair shop parking lot where he witnessed the murder of defendant Rittenhouse's first victim. I didn't see any corralling. And looking at that parking lot, it was pretty empty. There wasn't really anybody there inside the parking lot. And when Kyle ran through it, he makes it sound as if they had rounded up all of the protesters, like the Germans corralled all of the Jews, right? When they sent them to the concentration camps, they corralled them all into this parking lot. But that clearly didn't happen. Where he witnessed the murder of defendant Rittenhouse's first victim. Again, I would think alleged murder would be appropriate here, but when it comes to talking about Kyle, he doesn't get any benefit of the doubt. Thinking he could help the man, Mr. Pete tried desperately to move him to the nearby hospital, but they were unable to get free due to the lack of space and chaos that had been generated by the militia's tactics. Due to the lack of space and chaos. What does that mean? Due to the lack of space? What space do you need? You got a man that's hurt, put him on something, walk him over. The hospital's across the street. And by the way, Joseph Rosenbaum was taken to the hospital that night. So they got him there. Defendant Rittenhouse then fled, with protesters chasing after him, yelling for police to apprehend the shooter. Oh, come on. That is just a false, blatant lie. They did not yell for the police to apprehend the shooter. They yelled at people to attack him. No one called for the police. The police were too far down the road. Cranium that boy. Get him. All of those commands were for other protesters and rioters to attack Kyle, not for the police. This is just a lie. Anthony Huber, plaintiff Giddings' partner, chased after him, attempting to disarm Rittenhouse with his skateboard. No, you don't try to disarm somebody with a skateboard. In order to protect the lives of his friends. Oh, give me a break. Kyle was running away from the crowd. The crowd was chasing him. He was trying to make it to the police. He told Gage Grosskreutz, sorry, Gage, I know you don't like the way I pronounce your name. Let me try that better. Gage Grosskreutz, that he was trying to get to the police. You show me any friends of Huber's that were in danger of Kyle that he tried to save that night. Huber, in fact, was roaring up on his skateboard from behind Kyle at fairly high speed. He was far behind Kyle. So where were these friends that he was trying to save? I'd like to see somebody point them out. That was when Rittenhouse fatally shot Anthony, Hannah's life partner. Yeah, I know that this is Hannah's life partner. You've only said it 50 times. Okay, by the way, there is a footnote 14. This was all recorded on Pete's live stream. I'd like to see that. I haven't seen that. Maybe somebody can share it. Okay, so paragraph 52 looks about right. Since the shooting, many Boogaloo Bois and co-conspirators praised and ratified Rittenhouse's actions. Yeah, I don't know why that is important. Claiming he is a hero of the movement, well, they can claim whatever they want. One post referred to him as one of the boys. Yeah, well, whatever. They also started a collection for Rittenhouse's defense attorney fees. There's no harm in that, which currently sits at over $100,000. So what? Okay, so this goes on to talk about Plaintiff Palmer and her trek to Kenosha to protest. And it says, while in transit from Milwaukee to Kenosha, about 15 cars and trucks driven by white males. Oh, man. I was thinking it was no big deal, but they're driven by white males, so this is serious stuff here. Aggressively tailed their group. The moment they exited the highway into Kenosha, more cars driven by white men followed them in a threatening manner. Well, what does that mean? Or did they honk at them, bump them, try to run them off the road? Causing Plaintiff Palmer to feel like she, her children, and the rest of the group were in danger. Okay. Then it says, following their arrival at the Civic Center, so they didn't turn back. They just continue to go. She's got her kids with her, and they feel like their lives are in danger, but they're going to continue moving on to the protest. They were met by white militia members pointing assault rifles at them, their laser pointers trained on Plaintiff Palmer and her children. I think I would have left right then and there. You show up, and these militia members are pointing assault rifles. I think I'd get the hell out of there at that moment. Wouldn't stick around for more than a few seconds. Understandably terrified, the group decided they could not safely stay in Kenosha, and so returned to their cars, where they found their tires slashed. They should never have gotten out of the cars. If they really felt that much in danger, they should have just turned around and went back home. They got kids with them. As they were trying to repair the tires. Now, how in the hell do you repair a slashed tire? Well, you could put an inner tube in it. Nope, not if it's a sidewall. So, what do they mean by repair the tires? So they could drive to safety. 3 militia members drove up. Oh, by the way, I missed a footnote here that says here, number 15. Oh, this is about being aggressively tailed. And it says here, there seemed to be part of a plan to Plaintiff Palmer. That is, that trucks from the militia supporters were stationed and looking for black people traveling from Milwaukee. That's conjecture. Got any evidence to support that? And as far as where they found their tires slashed, they said they also saw 3 white militia members standing alongside where they were parked, laughing at them. Who cares? Not relevant. Unless they actually did it. Do you have any evidence that they did? Do you have evidence that they were militia members? 3 militia members drove up in a black truck and pepper sprayed, maced them. Well, which one? Pepper spray and mace are different things. Mace is not legal in Wisconsin. Pepper spray is. Pepper spray is pretty much legal everywhere, but not mace. Causing not only physical pain and suffering, but the mental anguish and historic dehumanization that comes from armed white men physically preventing black Americans from exercising their rights and privileges. Having been violently prevented from traveling and exercising their rights in another locale, plaintiff and her group tried to find police to make a complaint, but they were nowhere in sight. They pooled together their spares to replace tires. Amazing that they all had the same lug configurations. You can imagine driving home on 4 tires that are all different sizes. And by the way, most spares today, you get the little donut thing. You're not going to get the regular spare. So this kind of odd. This is really an odd statement to make, that they pooled together their spares to replace. That makes no sense at all. However, when they went, they were met with trucks driven by white men who used their vehicles to control where the group went, blocking their way out of town. Yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't sound right. That doesn't make sense to me. After escaping Kenosha without being able to take part in the protest, oh man, they didn't even get a chance to take part in the protest. They thankfully made it back to Milwaukee. All right, so Facebook's role, don't care. They can go to hell, as far as I'm concerned. Moreover, though it labeled defendant Rittenhouse's actions as a mass murder, no, to be a mass murder, it has to be 3 or more. Facebook claimed there were no direct links between his accounts and the Kenosha Guard page. Yeah, right. I mean, they looked. There's just no connection between Rittenhouse and the Kenosha Guard. However, common sense and likely further discovery counsels that Rittenhouse would not have known about or traveled to Kenosha but for the call to arms having been widely publicized. Well, Pete made it. He knew about it. Is he a Kenosha Guard member? They keep trying to nail Kyle with being a member of the Kenosha Guard, but there is no evidence to support that. And I love this. However, common sense and likely further discovery. Is this used in law? That I don't have the evidence, but I bet that the evidence that's going to come out is going to support my argument. Isn't this sort of a truth by prophecy fallacy? I don't know. Plaintiff Giddings, now this is the damages. Plaintiff Giddings has experienced profound emotional trauma and physical suffering from seeing her significant other murdered. Not only did this deprive her of the right to protest on the night. Oh wait, that's it? The big thing about it is that she's experienced profound emotional trauma and physical suffering from seeing her significant other murdered. And their deal is this deprived her of her right to protest. It served to have a chilling effect with regard to her protest rights going forward. Okay, so I would think that the murder itself is far, far bigger than this, but okay. Okay, so I'm going to skip down here. Additionally, since the armed militias conspired together to terrorize plaintiffs and protesters in Kenosha, the size of constitutionally protected protest in Kenosha has greatly diminished out of fear of having to protest at the end of a sniper rifle. Who is writing this crap? That's ridiculous. It's inflammatory, flowery language. The call to arms and organizing between these militias resulted in terror, fear, and murder. These militias are not police officers or law enforcement and lack training with regard to constitutional rights and protest control. Wait, I thought that the whole thing about the protests was that the police did not have sufficient training and didn't know how to control protests. I thought that these protests were all about the evilness of the police and their victimization of the BLM. But now they're saying these militias, they didn't have the capability and the smarts and the wisdom and the training of our beloved police force, yet assumed the role of law enforcement by conspiring together to control and regress protest rights by creating the real risk that legal protest can result in being assaulted, threatened, shot, or killed by organized groups of citizens who hold deeply irrational beliefs about race, history, and American society, which you, damn it, would cut down the lengths of your sentences. Okay, so I'm going to read down here. This is 74. Both Balch and Rittenhouse communicated extensively during the time that led up to Rittenhouse shooting 3 people, furthering the conspiracy to prevent plaintiffs' freedom of movement, as well as depriving them of their rights to be free from harassment, assault, and fear of death. Given Balch's previous history supporting white nationalists and Nazi propaganda, his intent to engage in the racially motivated deprivation of rights suffered by plaintiffs is evident. No, I think that evidence would involve a little bit more than that. I think looking at somebody's background is not enough evidence to reward somebody for damages. So why was this lawsuit withdrawn? First of all, I think that the judge might have had some pretty harsh criticism of their writing. This just comes off as unprofessional as hell. Cliches, poor sentence construction. This thing looks like it was written in haste. Guilt by association seems to be the dominant theme in everything they do here. They don't really stack a lot of evidence there. They even talk about events like protesters that are threatening people with no evidence stated. Also, I think that as facts came out over time, their position became more untenable. We all pretty well surmised that Jacob Blake was armed that day. They found the knife on the floorboard of the car. You don't drive around with a knife on your floorboard. He was carrying it. And anybody who heard about that, the first thing they thought, they found the knife on the floorboard, he must have had it in his hand. And so we sort of knew that Jacob Blake was armed. They didn't. They assumed he was unarmed. And then all of a sudden, news comes out, guess what? He's armed. Not to say that that event would have made much difference in this lawsuit. However, it was that kind of thing that just kept rolling out as people found out more and more and more about what took place that night in Kenosha. Their arguments got weaker and weaker and weaker. Videos were coming out that showed Ryan Balch had nothing to do with any kind of conspiracy to hurt people that night. And so a lot of their arguments just started falling by the wayside. I think ultimately in the end, they got increasingly embarrassed over what they were submitting. And that led to their decision to withdraw their lawsuit. Like my video and subscribe to my channel. I know it was long, but hey, you got to go through this stuff thoroughly.